Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Megan Remington. I am our Community Education Coordinator at Coconino Community College. So happy to have you all with us today. Happy December, happy almost end of 2020. I'm just gonna give you a few quick ground rules on how all of this works for our lecture today. If you've never been in a webinar before, we have a couple of different ways that we interact with you. One of them is our chat box, which you'll see below our participants list on the right side. We also have a Q&A option. Q&A tends to help us if you have a question, because then that way it doesn't get lost in the chat. And we will be sure to answer your questions by the end of the webinar. So if you don't have your question answered immediately, we will make sure we get to it, so no worries there. So I'm really excited about this presentation. If you're like me, you've seen the ads floating around on Facebook. It's kind of a big deal, and it's exciting because I got to see the cool the trailer for the presentation, or that's part of the presentation for today, and it's awesome. You guys are in for a real treat. So what I'd like to do right now is I'm going to introduce our presenters that are with us today. So and I don't think I'd point, but I don't think that my box is in the exact location that they would have it for everybody else. So so we've got Sarah Smallwood. She is the Arts Programming Manager for the Coconino Center for the Arts. And then our two headliners, Jane Marks, who is an NAU Professor of Biological Sciences, and Julie Comnick, who many know for her art. And also she is the curator of the Parched exhibit. And we're so excited to have all of you with us today. We really appreciate your time. And with that, Sarah is gonna kind of open things up for us. And yeah, let's get this thing rolling.
Hello, everyone. As Megan mentioned, I am the Arts Programming Manager with the Flagstaff Arts Council. We manage the Coconino Center for the Arts, which is up on the 180 behind the Pioneer Museum. And we're here to talk about our signature exhibitions today, namely Parched. Signature exhibitions are a project that we've been working on at the center for about 8 years now. The first kind of miniature signature exhibition happened in 2012. We presented a show called Beyond the Border, which dealt with environmental impact issues surrounding the US-Mexico border, the border wall, and border policies. And it was the first time that we did an art show that really focused on a topical issue. It was different from our other signature exhibitions in that we didn't do a boot camp for it. So the program, the signature exhibitions program after 2012 really developed into a larger, more rounded out program where we brought the arts and sciences together before the planning for the show, which we call our Arts and Science Boot Camp. The show after Beyond the Border we did was Fires of Change, and that opened in September of 2015. And that dealt with the size and number of wildfires in the Southwest and their impacts on our landscapes. Following that, we did Hope and Trauma in a Poisoned Land, which opened in August of 2017, which was all about the impacts of uranium mining on Navajo land and people. And then we got to Parched. So we've been doing these signature exhibitions pretty much every 2 years. Planning for Parched began in late 2018. And the timeline shuffled a little bit. It was originally scheduled to open in 2019, but due to some unforeseen planning situations and COVID, we ended up opening the show formally September 11th of 2020. So we were open at the center for a period of time for folks to come in and safely view the exhibition in person. The center currently is closed, unfortunately, to align with Coconino County's COVID guidelines. So we're no longer taking any more in-person reservations to see the show, though it is still mounted in our main gallery. But it is scheduled to remain on view through January 9th of 2021. So if things change in the next few weeks and we get the okay to do so, there's potential for us to reopen the show for that last week happening in early January of 21. But there are other opportunities. After the show closes at the center, it will travel to the Ameren Museum, opening in February 2021, and it'll remain on view there for an entire year. And once it closes, it will again travel to Natural History Institute in Prescott, Arizona in 2022. These signature exhibitions are key in our programming because they provide an opportunity for viewers to engage with these important topics through the eyes of the artists. There are other opportunities to experience the Parched exhibition virtually. We just launched the virtual website, which I, in a moment, will drop the link in the chat box here. So everyone can go on to the website. It's a great place to view all the artist images, artist statements, written work from Jane Marks, who's on this call, and the curator statement from Julie, and all the hard work that's gone into investigating this topic will be found on that virtual exhibition website. Another really exciting opportunity to engage with Parched is the documentary that we are premiering this Thursday at 5 o'clock. It's completely free to participate. And I will again drop that link in the chat box. So we encourage everyone who's viewing today's webinar to sign up for that documentary premiere and Q&A. But we will show that trailer a little bit later in this call. So I'm just going to toss it over to Jane Marks now.
Jane, you're on mute.
Okay, hi again. Thank you. It's my name's Jane Marks. I'm a professor in biology at NAU in the Center for Ecosystem Science and Society, and I've been studying rivers for over 20 years. I'm going to share my screen now and give you a walkthrough of, let's see. Okay, can you see my screen now? Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna play it from the start. Okay. I was invited into the Parched project over 2 years ago. And so my role was to be part of a steering committee that was tasked to teach a group of 9 artists everything we could about water in the Southwest in under a week. And so this was a daunting challenge. I teach an entire semester course in stream ecology. I teach another course on the algae. You could, somebody else teaches a hydrology class, a water policy class. And yet we just had 1 week to impart on a group of artists the main principles about water in the Southwest. So before I tell you how we did this and some of the main sites that we visited, I'm going to do a quick poll just to assess your basic knowledge and get you curious about basic water issues. So just, if you don't know the answer, just guess and let's see where you are. Oh, host, okay, great. So you should be able to see the poll.
We've got it open, so I'm going to go ahead and give everyone a couple seconds to answer the questions, and once I've seen enough, I'll Yeah, I know no one can see it but me, but yeah, we've got a very well. The first question's pretty one-sided, but there's a pretty broad variety of answers otherwise. Okay, we're gonna give it 5 more seconds. 3, 2, 1, and we'll go ahead and oh, there we go, 10 for 10.
Okay.
And there you are.
Okay, so which sector uses the most water? Okay, agriculture is the right answer, and it's true in Arizona, and it's true almost everywhere else in the world. How many wild and scenic rivers are there? The correct answer is 2, Fossil Creek and the Upper Verde. I wish there were 8, but there aren't. And the third answer, I can't see your responses, so I think you need to scroll down for me. Can you scroll this?
I think it should be showing on your screen. So
Oh,
I
there we
think
go.
you
I
can
can scroll
scroll.
it. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and yes, most people got the 7 states have rights to the Colorado River. And I framed the question to direct you towards that, but also 2 states in Mexico also have claims, and then multiple tribes have claims. Okay, so that was fun. All right, so 1 week to teach about water. What we decided to do was, rather than to spend a lot of time in the classroom, was to use that week to go on one big giant field trip and to visit many sites that showed conflicts and trade-offs with water management. And we had 3 themes that we wanted to impress upon people for each of the sites that we saw. And the first theme was water management and policy. The second was water for nature. And the third was water justice. So how do you show water policy and management to a group of artists? Well, you do it by visiting the infrastructure. And so one of the first sites that we went to was the Glen Canyon Dam, because you can't understand water in the Western United States without understanding both the impacts and the benefits of these large dams. And large dams aren't unique to the Western United States. About 2/3 of the rivers in the Northern Hemisphere are what we call regulated rivers, which means that they don't have natural flow regimes, that people take water out of them or people regulate the flow. One issue that I want to really stress is that even though the Glen Canyon Dam and many of the dams on the Colorado River are affiliated with hydropower production, it's really not their main purpose. So they might have been built primarily for hydropower production, but right now their main purpose is for water storage and distribution. So nature really likes free-flowing rivers, but humans don't, because we need to have water when we want it and where we want it. So all the dams, these big, large dams on the Colorado River right now are, even if they are used for hydropower, their main importance is that they deliver water to cities, everywhere from Denver, Phoenix, Tucson, Los Angeles, Las Vegas was built by Colorado River water. And similarly, most of our agriculture in this region is being irrigated with Colorado River water. And the reason this is hard for nature is that natural rivers have really irregular flows. So sometimes it's dry, sometimes it's wet. We have short floods, we have long floods. But that's what creates the habitat complexity of natural rivers. So I want you to remember next time you do a hike to a river to look at the complexity of the habitat itself. So rivers aren't pipes. Rivers are complex units with backwaters and pools and riffles. There's no spot on a river that looks like another spot. And it's this, and flow is what natural flow regimes that vary throughout the year is what creates the habitat complexity of the rivers. And that's what provides habitat for all the different insects and fish that use them. As we drove up to the reservation, as we drove up to the dam, we of course went through the reservation. And I want to remind people we were right here at Glen Canyon Dam, but that a lot of the Colorado River, particularly the upper basin, runs through the Navajo Nation. There's multiple other tribes, Hopi, Mojave, Paiute, that also have historically had rights and used the Colorado River. And what's striking is that we're standing on the or above on a bridge above the Colorado River, but we're going through land that's really parched, very, very dry. This is Cleve Benally. He's one of our artists who grew up on the Navajo reservation and was really instrumental in the boot camp and helping us talk to people that lived on the reservation and people that are working on the reservation. Over 30% of people that live on the reservation do not have access to safe drinking water in their homes. So it's a really common phenomena for people to be hauling water. So they go to wells, fill up these barrels and bring it to their homes. And I think we all read a lot in the newspaper about how difficult it is to wash your hands when you don't have running water in your house. We also talked with Roger Clark from the Grand Canyon Trust. In the background is the now defunct Navajo Generating Station. And just like many people on the reservation don't have running water in their homes, they also don't have electricity, even though there were these coal power plants right on their land. And so we talked a lot about the social injustice of resource extraction on the reservation, where a lot of the profits left, but a lot of the environmental health impacts remain. Scattered throughout the Navajo reservation and on Hopi are these abandoned uranium mines. And so that's part of the problem with water quality up there. There's both regulated and unregulated wells. And regulated wells mean that the EPA has tested them and then we know that they're safe for people to drink. Unregulated wells are often like historic wells where the water's not safe. They're intended to be used just for livestock. But as you can imagine, as times got hard, and this happened, very recently with COVID, is that people need to access the water that's closest to where they live. So there's a lot of people on the reservation that aren't drinking healthy, clean water. We met with Ernest Tahoe, and he's going to be one of the speakers along with the artists. So is Roger Clark from the Grand Canyon in the documentary and the Q&A session afterwards. And Ernest is amazing. He just, started on his own an NGO in affiliation with the Black Mesa Water Coalition to bring filters to homes on the Hopi and Navajo reservation. So he's not connected to any government organization. It used to be kind of a one-man show. Now it's a two-man show. He's brought in Al, who's also in the documentary. And so they're raising money through international non-government organizations to bring filters so that people that are living on the reservation can filter their water and have safer drinking water. So that was both striking and inspirational to talk with Ernest. What was most striking is that we spent one night on the reservation, and then the next night we went down south to Phoenix and woke up to a site like this. So it's hard to believe within under 200 miles, we have land that's parched, interspersed with a very lush, generous use of water. When we were in Scottsdale, we visited the Scottsdale Water Campus, which is an amazing facility. It's got state-of-the-art water treatment. So we call it tertiary treatment, but it is basically our technological best way to treat water. And what was interesting about this is that Scottsdale is such an affluent community that the water that they're using, they sell for golf courses. And so in one part of our state, we have people that don't even have access to safe drinking water. In another part of our state, we have people that can, afford the very best technology in the world for their recreation. One more other comment that I want to make about reclaimed water, because I'm sure you're all hearing a lot about it. The Scottsdale Water Campus and other places like the city of Flagstaff that are using reclaimed water are getting it to a level to meet EPA standards, which means that to the best of our ability, the water is safe. It's generally not used for drinking. It's used for things like golf courses, landscaping, non-potable, what we call non-potable. But the other thing to keep in mind is that there's so many contaminants now in water. Pharmaceuticals are found all over the world. So you can go to pretty remote places, sample the water, and you can find antihistamines in the water. You can find caffeine in the water. And so we've distributed chemicals all throughout the world, and the EPA hasn't been able to really keep up with how we're contaminating water. So I don't want to say that it's not safe. I'm just saying that it's a work in progress. As water becomes more and more scarce and we're using more reclaimed water, we're going to need to increase our ability to test for a huge, much wider range of contaminants than we're currently testing for. And then another thing that came up through the our week-long boot camp is the limits of science. So as a scientist or an engineer, we can measure many, many things about the water quality. And that became heightened in the debate of whether or not to use reclaimed water for snow bowl. But the issue is that it's not really a scientific issue, because the other side of using reclaimed water, there were some concerns about safety, but the bigger concerns were the spiritual value of the peaks to the many, many tribes. I think there's 12 tribes who see the San Francisco peaks as sacred sites. And so these, it becomes somewhat meaningless to talk about the science of reclaimed water, because the objections to it were really in a different sphere. And I think that was part of the problem, is that it got relegated to scientific debate, when in fact it really was a much more cultural and spiritual debate. So you may be thinking, well, I don't play golf, so I'm not part of that problem, and I don't ski, so I'm not part of that problem. I just do yoga. I have my, my activities are on my one little mat. But if you do yoga, you probably are also the kind of person that eats a lot of salads. And if you're eating a salad, particularly in the winter, you're consuming water from the Colorado River. And so, as everybody got right in the poll, agriculture uses about 67% of water that humans use. And so this is, it's really strikingly similar across regions. Almost anywhere in the world, that 2/3 of our water is being used in the agriculture sector. And of course we need to eat, but we don't do agriculture in a way that always makes sense in terms of conserving and using water wisely. Water is extremely cheap for particularly large scale farmers. So there's a lot of policy people that are looking to change the pricing of water, as an incentive to use irrigation much more judiciously. And Josh, who's one of the artists, talks about in the documentary, when he was doing his research for his project, that he came across a farm that's owned by people from Saudi Arabia, that they're growing alfalfa for cattle in Arizona. And it's a practice that's not even allowed in Saudi Arabia, where the criteria for water conservation is much stricter. So we're doing crazy things like growing alfalfa in Arizona to be exported to Saudi Arabia, because our policies and laws are so lenient with respect to water. But we're not going to be able to do that forevermore, with climate change and with increasing populations reducing our water supplies. And so you might be thinking, well, I don't really eat much salad. I'm really a carnivore. I eat a lot of burgers. Well, it turns out that that's even worse, right? So I gave the alfalfa example, and there's, some people from the Nature Conservancy and others that are giving talks that says your burger's killing my native fish. And so we really do need to rethink our food systems for a lot of reasons, from everything from health, but also our food systems are not water friendly. So you all got this right, but I just thought I'd show it anyway. This is the Colorado water river. This is the whole watershed. And it's just amazing to me that we're, it's everything from way up high in Wyoming, but Colorado River water is fueling Denver, it's fueling Colorado Springs, it's fueling Albuquerque and Santa Fe. Then of course the cities in Arizona, LA, and then down into Mexico. So it's, you know, it's a super big watershed and we're all connected. All of the laws were developed when we had more water. And so they happened to be developed at a time where there was just a lot of rainfall. And so now, you know, I think everybody knows that Lake Powell levels are low, Lake Mead levels are low, and climate change is only going to make that worse. So you know, the science is becoming more and more refined, and we know that we're going to see warmer temperatures and more droughts in the Southwest. We also know that it's a great place to live, and we're just going to see more and more people. And so we're really going to have to work hard to figure out, you know, how to allocate water fairly, both to make sure that everybody that lives in the region, including the tribes, has access to clean water, and you know, and that we can figure out a way to enjoy our lives and to recreate. I'm going to end on a positive note of a restoration success story. This is Fossil Creek. It's a site that I've worked at for not quite 20 years. And it's an important site because A, it's one of 2 wild and scenic rivers in Arizona. The Upper Verde is the other one. And it's the site of the largest river restoration project in the Southwest. So Fossil Creek used to be a site for hydropower. APS, Arizona Public Service, was running two hydropower plants at Irving and Childs that diverted about 90% of Fossil Creek out of the basin, and then it re-entered into the Verde. So over 10 years ago, a group of environmental groups lobbied APS because every 50 years, hydropower plants have to be relicensed through the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And so environmental groups are using this as an opportunity to either get organizations to run the dams better for native species, or as an opportunity to take down dams. And so Fossil Creek fell into that category. We also used as an opportunity to remove the exotic fish, so it was bass and sunfish, and to repatriate it with just native species of fish. This is me collecting algae with Deborah, who I think is on this call, is also one of the artists. And so her artwork is about the base of the food web, the algae. And the amazing thing about Fossil Creek was not only did a bunch of groups, so federal groups, state groups, NGOs all get together, scientists, to figure out a way how to restore this river, is that it really worked. And so we were able to bring back the algae that grows in Fossil Creek. This is on the right. This is Megan, one of my grad students who studied the insects. The insects are super important. They're what feed the fish, they're what feed the birds. When they emerge, they feed lizards and all sorts of animals that live in riparian zones, which is the plants, the forests that are on the banks of rivers. Here's some cool shots under the microscope of my invertebrate friends. But we brought them all back, and some of this, depending on how you count, 4 or 5 species of native fish. And so Fossil Creek's a reminder that if people work together, we can reverse environmental damage. We can really have the best of both worlds. So I'm going to leave it to Julie to talk about the specific artwork.
Julie, you're muted.
Sorry. Okay, anyway, I was just giving a shout out to Megan. Thank you for organizing this. And Jane, thank you for that presentation about the lead up to the exhibition, which is what I'm going to be talking about. So my name is Julie. I'm an artist and educator and the curator for Parched, the Art of Water in the Southwest. And you know what I really like about the title given to this Comet presentation is really talking about the link between the arts and sciences. And this is not actually my first slide. There it is. Sorry, technology. But the idea of thinking about how much goes into an exhibition like this, essentially years of planning. Jane really modeled the idea of a group of experts came together and created the information and the experiential workshops that were delivered to the artists so that they could come from an informed perspective in creating their artworks. And then after the water science boot camp, as it was called, the artists had 18 months to create new projects on the topic of water in the Southwest. So as I go through these images, my objective here is just to highlight a little of each of the artists' work, particularly how they responded to the what was delivered in the boot camp workshops. So as we go through, I'll talk just a little bit more about that, but I wanted to start with a couple installation images that show what the project looks like at Coconino Center for the Arts, where it's been up for the last few months. And as Sarah said, that there's virtual opportunities to see the exhibition. So I really encourage all of you to get on the link and look at the virtual exhibition, which shows each of the artists' projects and their own writing about their work, and also the Parched documentary being premiered this Thursday. The artists will be there for a live question and answer after the documentary. So hopefully you'll have questions that you want to reach out and ask those artists, and that's a great opportunity to do that. So in this installation shot, I just want to call out Glory Ticini Campoy's piece, which is in the foreground here. I think Glory's an attendee with us today. Hi, Glory, thanks for joining us. But just as an entry piece into the project, Glory has created a sculptural installation that references monsoon clouds and has hand printed tribal languages. The text, each of those words refers to water in a tribal languages from tribes in Arizona and down into Mexico. So it's specific to this region. But what I love about this piece is it also roots us in the Southwest landscape. The monsoon patterns that we experience here, you don't see anywhere else in the United States except for the Southwest. So it's roots it in place, it roots it in the indigenous culture, and how important water is to have so many words that describe it. And you get some of the, I'll mention each of the artists that you see in the rest of the space beyond. And then going over into just another installation view showing several of the artists' works. Deborah Edgerton in the top left corner of this, we'll get to her work, but also with us today in the Zoom meeting. Hi, Deborah. But just thinking about, I appreciated, Jane, that you showed a slide that said the limits of science, because Sarah mentioned the past signature projects that pair or bridge the arts and sciences through Flagstaff Arts Council at Coconino Center for the Arts. And the idea being that science reaches a particular audience, but has a hard time reaching a wide and varied audience. So with these arts and science collaboration, the idea being you take a group of artists, inform them with the content and the issues specific to the region, and then ask the artists to create their own interpretations in the form of art projects, which in turn asks the viewer to reach their own informed conclusions and hopefully take further interest or action on those themes. So the idea is, to generate more questions, a diversity of perspectives and approaches and art forms to do that. So from here, I'm just going to, again, touch on the artist projects and highlight where they specifically respond to what was delivered in the Water Science Bootcamp. So this is Kathleen Vilo's work. Kathleen is an artist in Tucson, and Kathleen creates these images. They're photographs, but they're camera-less photographs or photograms. So Kathleen worked with Ernest Tahoe, who Jane mentioned, who's the Hopi elder who works to provide water filtration systems to households on the Hopi reservation. And Kathleen collaborated with Ernest to access water on the Hopi Reservation. They were able to collect water together, and Kathleen was able to then take those water samples back to her home studio in Tucson, where she created water baths in her dark rooms, and then she submerged photographic paper under that water, exposed it to a light, and then essentially created a photogram of that specificity of the water. And these are accompanied with the vials of water that say where each image the water source is. So some are filtered waters from homes, some are non-filtered waters for homes, some are springs. Kathleen would be very cautious to say that the images aren't science in themselves, but it's a visual expression of that science. So it really shows the difference visually between different water samples and encourage you to ask more deeply, what are the differences? And then by looking at those vials, sort of the artifacts, if you will, that let you know, oh, these are actually different places. What's the disparity or the discrepancy amongst those? This is another installation image. You can see Kathleen's work on the wall. This is two projects that I'll talk about individually. The foreground, the center is Sean Scablin's sculptural installation. It's filled with cattail down, and it's his way of referencing effluent or reclaimed sewage, essentially used for snowmaking on the San Francisco peaks, but in a very abstracted way, thinking about the nature, the texture of what snow is, and the reference to a water tank that we often see for access for animals to have water in the Southwest. That became a collaboration with Delisa Miles of the video projection on the upper left here. So Delisa performed a dance piece out of Sean's sculpture. They're two standalone pieces at the end, but they were linked in the use of the sculpture for the performance. And Delisa's is a 4-part performance narrative using a mythical creature to talk about water, the importance of water in a really deep and moving performance piece in the form of video for the exhibition. And Neil Galloway has two pieces. I'm just going to refer to the first one pretty quickly and spend a little more time discussing the other one. So the piece on the left is called Groundwater. So it is a functional sand fountain, instead of water coming out of the fountain, sand is pumped through it, and there's a video component that shows that in action. But the piece on the right, it's perhaps less visually intriguing in the image here, but the idea is this is a component of a conceptual installation throughout the entire gallery space, where the 3 columns in the gallery each are painted with what are flood lines. The piece is called Flood Lines. And this piece really responds to the disparities in water allocation. So what he did is he investigated that different industries or groups of people pay different amounts for water. So the line at the top, which is within a foot of the ceiling of CCA, imagines that the entire volume of the space is filled with water, right? So for $100, a Central Arizona project would be able to afford to fill the space entirely with water for $100. That's Central Arizona project for agriculture. Whereas down at the bottom, the little tag there says water delivery. So for $100, those people who live in rural places or the Navajo Nation, for example, where they are hauling water to their property, the cost of water involves, you know, the fuel for your truck and time and all sorts of things, and the cost of the water. They can only fill for $100 that entire space up to about 1.5 inches off the floor. So there's different industries specific to Flagstaff in the region throughout that, but it's a conceptual project that really drives thinking about how the cost of water is negotiated differently for different people and industries. Jane referenced the work of Josh Biggs, who used drones to create aerial photographs that really visually show where water is imported into the desert for agriculture or recreation, in these pieces for agriculture. So just looking at landscapes and seeing, you know, where the desert stops and the water starts, and again recognizing that that water is largely imported into the valley. He traveled around the state, went to Yuma, looked at different agricultural industries, and visually how that can be documented visually through these photographs. Cleve and Alley did a couple different projects. There's 2 slides for these. So the first is this lenticular piece, which the bottom right actually shows one side. It's an optical illusion where you physically move around the piece and see the image change in the 3 dimensions. So the image in this case includes an attorney who was working on the Navajo Nation, negotiating water rights. And as you move around it, that image becomes that of a coyote or the mahi. And the text says, "Water is life" in Dene, in what, you know, references blood. And do I have the other image here? My screen is only showing half that. And then the other piece, store patterns too. So this one is, I'll go back to the last slide. So this one you can see on the top right here, it's a projection mapping piece. So this is a video that sort of collages together, juxtaposes a lot of the different elements that we observed in the water science boot camp. So traveling around to different places, but also talking about the impact that each of those has on indigenous communities and cultures. And Marie Gladou's is a video. So this is a still image from a video project that incorporated some ceremonial elements essentially as a contemporary performance piece. And finally, Deborah Edgerton's really responded to the boot camp by looking at the algae as a reference for these watercolor series of watercolor paintings. And so Deborah was really interested in the idea of, you know, looking through a slide at something microscopic and enlarging it. So really working with scale to create what becomes an almost abstracted image that still refers back to the algae, but also very interested in speaking to that idea of the microscopic and the looking through the slide by framing or mounting the pieces in these fabricated plexiglass mounts, which are intended to look like slides. So the slides you put under the microscope and look down. So in person, these are really just beautiful, eloquent, and sophisticated paintings that I think Jane really described the essence of Fossil Creek and why that's so important as restoration success story, and just starting at that microscopic level and thinking about the life that embodies within that project. And from there, I think this is a good opportunity. We're going to show you a short trailer of the documentary, just to give you sort of an idea of what it will look like, and encourage you all to register to attend that on Thursday. And then we'll come back to Sarah for some information, details about that, and then some time for a question and answer, I believe. Thank you.
Parched conveys an urgency that I feel is at the core of this project. You know, when you combine the arts and sciences, the art is able to tap into those emotions. And I think it's those emotional triggers, if you will, that really ask the viewer to look more deeply and to think about what their own response is.
Water should be more expensive, especially for those industries that use it most heavily. Agriculture is the #1 user of water in the state of Arizona because it's so cheap and our laws are so loose. So there's no incentive to be conservative with it.
That water is fossil water. It was added to those basins at the end of the last ice age. You pump it out and it's not replaced.
It's not right that there's people in our country that don't have access to safe drinking water, and yet there's other municipalities that they can afford to have the best technology to clean water to use on golf courses and for recreation.
We don't have a future without water, so that means no, we're not going to go along. And you know, I don't mind being confrontational and agitational and provocative on that level.
We have been looking more at uranium as more of a chemical toxicant that could potentially do damage to our DNA, that could cause mutations and move into cancer.
We grew Phoenix into what it is at our expense, and that's being parched.
There would be no life without water. Everything depends on water. And what is it to treat it with more respect and more care?
So it's a challenge. It is a conflict. And I think we're going to continue to be parched until we actually have that real talk.
So yeah, thank you everybody for tuning in. I know we can get into a Q&A really quick, but I just wanted to let everybody know that I did drop the landing page for the documentary premiere in this chat box. So if you haven't signed up for it, you can follow that link. The trailer's there again. If you wanted to register, there's a button and it's another Zoom call. So please go ahead and do that, and feel free to share it with all your friends and family, and that happens this Thursday at 5 o'clock.
And now's a great chance. If anyone has any questions, you're welcome to toss them in the Q&A or the chat box, whichever you prefer. Man, that is, I am endlessly amazed by the amount of work that has to go into a project like this. I mean, Julie, you said this was years in the making?
Yeah, so yeah, until people start asking questions, I'll just go with that, Megan. Yeah, so essentially, the steering committee was working for a good year and a half before year and a half before the boot camp to prepare sort of the curriculum for that. And then the artists had 18 months after that to create new works. And part of this is with the extended time frame and also the virtual elements, it's a way of responding to COVID and actually and things like this Zoom presentation today. We found that it actually enables for an art exhibition that is typically mostly a physical presence to actually reach quite a wide audience that isn't necessarily able to come see it in person. So that's been really rewarding also.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. I know we have the same situation. I think I had some folks from Alabama sign up for this presentation, so would not be surprised if we see statewide and nationwide attention for you guys, and that's awesome. And it doesn't look like we have anything other than just some gratitude in the chat box. So with that, we have this recorded, so we'll make sure we share this recording with everybody afterwards. I will make sure that the links that Sarah included in the chat are in that email. So if you didn't get a chance to click before we log off today, or if you forget where it was, we'll make sure that gets out to you. Please share and get the word out to everybody. And Jane, Julie, Sarah, thank you so much for your time. It is so appreciated when people give their time willingly so we can offer stuff like this for free. I know that our attendees appreciate it too. So you guys are fabulous. I'm so excited to tune in on Thursday and see what all of this craziness is about. You guys are great, and we appreciate you. So with that, everybody have a wonderful day. 2021 community education programming is going to come out soon. We're working on all the fun details. So we look forward to seeing you in 2021, and we're going to have a great time. So have a wonderful day. Happy holidays. Happy New Year, and have a great day. Bye, guys.
Thank you.